Hey everybody,
Hi.
It's Daniel Midgley and Lauren Gawne of Lingthusiasm.
Hi, Daniel.
Hi, it's great to be here with you.
It's very exciting.
We have just survived the ALS, the meeting of the Australian Linguistic Society 2017, where we both found ourselves because, we're both linguists, we both do stuff
In Australia.
in Australia, and we're social. So here we are.
Yeah.
Where
And
else?
It's also the end of ALS, which is why we're both in our non-conference, very casual gear.
Are you beat? I'm kind of blasted after all that.
I am so conferenced out. It's been great.
But we're not allowed to be conferenced out because we are heading, along with everybody else, to Canberra for the ALT.
The Association of Linguistic Typology, which is a big international conference that's in Australia for this year. It happens every 2 years, and this time it's in Australia for the first time, which is very exciting.
It's cool. So many people are going. So there's ALS, ALT. There's no conferences, ALU, ALV, and so on.
No, we have an ALW, that's the Australian Languages Workshop, that happens somewhere near Easter, I think. Or Australian Languages Weekend.
So anyway, we've been hanging, we've been chilling, we've been listening to conference talks, we've been talking to our heroes, which are just floating around in great quantities.
It's so fabulous. It's getting to talk to people who have existed as article authors and now are real people.
Now, I want to ask you a bit about your podcast, Lingthusiasm.
Sure.
Because it's really enjoyable, and we've mentioned it loads of times on the show.
I always get it when I listen to Talk the Talk, and there's a shout out to something we've talked about. I'm like, yay!
Yay! So, you've been doing blogging for ever.
Since 2011, and I still think of Lingthusiasm as one of the new kid. Superlingo.
It is.
Sorry, I still think of Superlingo as the new kid blog compared to the separated by a common language that Lynn Murphy writes and Stan Kerry's blog.
Yep.
I always think of myself as this upstart compared to them, but
well, you are, but in blog years, you've been around for a long time.
It's 7 years old, which is a bit amazing.
A long time.
Yeah.
And that's how I first ran into you, was because I checked out your posts.
Increasingly, that's how more and more linguists know of me.
And I thought, I need to step up my blogging game because this is really cool. But then you teamed up with Gretchen McCulloch in Lingthusiasm. What was it? How did that get started?
It got started because we knew each other from the internet, and that I think that's a really important part of our kind of where we met. It's very important to acknowledge that happened on the internet. So we kind of started chatting on Twitter, and then she got in touch with me because she was beginning to do more linguistics Wikipedia editathons.
Oh, cool.
And she was like, you seem like a person who's done some Wikipedia work. And so I started running them. She would run them in the States and I would run them in Singapore, and then I took them to the UK.
Now, is this at linguistic conferences? Everyone
So
just
she
jumps in?
runs editathons at conferences. So she's run them at LSA, which is the big Linguistic Society of America conference. She's run them at the International Conference of Language Documentation in Hawaii. I've run them at the Linguistic Society of Great Britain, or Linguistics Association of Great Britain conference. I ran monthly-ish editing events in the UK at SOAS for a year or so. And so it's about, that's also very central to both of our really strong interest in communicating linguistic research to a general audience. Because Wikipedia is the one thing people read,
It's huge. And by the way, that's one thing that makes linguistics on Wikipedia so reliable, and it's why I recommend it unreservedly.
I use it all the time
students.
As a primary, just what is
this thing?
What is this thing again?
I want to understand this area, but I don't want to go too into it. Okay.
Yeah. So we both got started on that, and then through that we ended up teaching a summer school course on editing Wikipedia for endangered languages at a summer school called CoLang, which runs in opposite years to the Linguistics Institute through LSA. And that was the first time we met IRL. And we basically spent 2 weeks in Alaska over the solstice.
Oh, wow.
So like we would just stay awake until 2 every night talking. And we would have like, we had the party house. So other linguists would kind of come by because we were awake reliably. And we just realized that linguists have all these fascinating conversations about language, and they really are fascinated by how language works and how people use language. And we were having these amazing conversations, and we were like, it would just be so nice to share this. And that's where essentially the motivation for Lingthusiasm was born. We were just like, should we do a podcast? Yeah, let's do a podcast. And so that was mid-2015, and then we spent a bit of time mid-20... Gosh, it's all a blur now, isn't it?
Well, you did take a little while.
Mid-2016.
Yeah, you took about 6 months or something.
We spent about 6 months kind of tinkering on it, getting the format right, recording a bunch of episodes to launch at the end of 2016. So the show's a year old officially now, as of November. It's pretty cool. And I think, between us we have over a dozen years of blogging experience. Gretchen's been running All Things Linguistics since 2012.
And where can people find you on Superlingo?
Superlingo is just superlingo.com and at Superlingo on Twitter.
Okay.
And we, so we've both been blogging for a long time and writing in other places and that kind of stuff. And we've both been blown away with the response for Lingthusiasm. And I think it's that nice thing about podcasts just feel really personal. Like, I mean, in that way that we hadn't met at the start of the week, but I'm like, I know you and Ben and Kylie and all my mates, like, so.
Did you get that feeling? Like,
yeah. It's just like, I know what you were interested in linguistics and that kind of stuff. So it's really personal.
It's very revealing.
It can be quite revealing. Compared to blogging, you can hold a lot more back.
But like the choice of topics, what does Daniel choose? What does he avoid?
And you can kind of edit that a bit more with blogging, whereas with podcasting there is, especially the way we run our show, and I think you run your show, there's a bit of like, where will this go? We're never quite sure with every episode.
Yeah.
And so I just love sharing. The name came from the fact that we are genuinely enthusiastic about linguistics, and we love it, and we love sharing it with people, and that's the origin story.
Now, your podcast and our podcast are quite different in some ways in the format, the way we do stuff.
Yeah.
For example, you are 2 linguists.
Yes.
And I'm the only linguist on the staff of Dog the Talk.
Yeah.
So although Ben and Kylie are, they're getting good.
They are getting. I love it when Ben nails, like, he's like, "Is this?" And you're like, "Good work."
Yeah. Oh yeah. He always does that. They're both really smart. But of course, they're not linguists. Although, you know what though? I think I've kind of helped to orient them. Like, the most important things that I learned in my education wasn't the facts that I learned.
Yeah.
It was the way of processing information, and a lot of that was like through a descriptive lens. Like that makes a huge difference, and it makes a huge difference for my students as well. So I think they've got that. So if they're not linguists, well, by golly,
they definitely have a linguist outlook now.
They really do.
Yeah.
So fine, but they don't spend all day in that world like I do.
Yeah.
So I won't say it's lonely, because it's not, but
you're doing a lot of the terminology heavy lifting.
Yeah, like I'm kind of responsible for correcting maybe any popular misconceptions that they might still have, whereas you guys kind of keep each other in check.
Yeah, and we come from very different traditions in terms of our background.
How so?
Gretchen went to McGill, which is a university that has a very formalist background, so she in terms of like formal syntax, so she
right.
You don't have to look like that. But like the approach, like,
I was being the audience surrogate.
Okay. So she has really strong.
I secretly didn't know.
Well, she has a really strong approach that's in terms of like generative syntax.
Okay.
Like she understands that perspective, and I come from a very functionalist, so how language is used perspective, which is how a lot of Australian universities train people.
I have noticed that there's a huge influence from functionalism in Australia.
Yes, it's very strong, and that's a large part of how linguistics started in Australia. A lot of it was reactionary to what was happening in other parts of the world, but also a bit allowing ourselves to be a bit insulated from some of those discussions.
Can I just maybe give an example of how those two schools play out?
Sure.
Like, if you're a generativist, which was Chomsky's sort of paradigm, and that's where a lot of people were coming from, 40, 30, 20 years ago, you would probably say something like, well, all languages resemble each other because we all have a universal grammar in our brains, and that's why they look kind of the same. That would be a generative sort of answer. Whereas if you're a functionalist, you'd probably say something like, well, humans have human brains and they want to communicate information to each other, so they're probably going to use the same kinds of strategies to do that no matter what language you're in, because all humans have a human brain.
Yeah.
Am I getting that close?
I mean, there's lots of ways that this manifests in different... Because you're looking as a generativist at the structure of language, you sometimes are more focused on some things than others. So there isn't like a strong tradition of child language acquisition, or, one of my research areas is gesture. There's not a strong tradition of that. There is growing interest. Whereas, from a functionalist perspective, you're very open to understanding, how is this being used in context rather than in kind of a universal setting. And so that's a very gross divide, and there's lots of people who... and I think it's really important to acknowledge there are lots of people who straddle this. But what's important for us is that we don't ever really have any need to touch on a lot of that, because we're not terminologically driven. Like, we have a policy of like one piece of terminology per episode.
Oh man.
It's like, what's our piece of terminology we're gonna bring into the conversation this episode. So we don't have a very terminologically driven, and a lot of the theory, if we do talk about linguistic theory, it's the kind of stuff that's generally agreed upon. And so even though we have very different perspectives, we converge on so many things.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, that's one thing, that you kind of share the linguistic burden a little bit.
Yeah.
The other thing is that at Talk the Talk, we're all in the same city.
True.
And so we can get together, we can have back and forth.
So this goes back to the importance of the fact that Gretchen and I met on the internet, because this is how we do a lot of our socializing with each other, and it's where a lot of we have a very rich social life on the internet with other people who I've slowly getting to meet people. It's such a pleasure to meet people and have it confirmed that they are just as lovely as they appear online, and that's an important part of how we work. Our two production team members are in two other places. So we're a very distributed team, but we're a team who have grown up using the internet as a form of communication and negotiate a lot of and use the internet very emotively. So it's not just a functional place to communicate; it's a place where we would communicate anyway, even if we lived down the road from each other. We would still be like sending messages and using Snapchat and that kind of stuff.
I think being local has some distinct advantages, like not just being able to get together, but we can actually tour and do maybe live shows in Perth, which is a lot of fun. Yeah. More difficult for you, although you have done a live show.
Yes.
Yeah. And the other thing is that people hear us on the radio, so there's kind of a built-in sort of community there. But sometimes that's a double-edged sword, because it sometimes is hard to escape Perth. I mean, we put our podcasts out, and that is global. Yeah. But we're not just global; we're also local. Whereas you're totally global.
Yeah, by kind of accident, but also tapping into this network of linguists that do exist across the world, and that's been very important for us on the show, but just personally as someone who's moved for work quite a bit in the last few years. That academic network of linguists and has come into play really importantly for me in terms of moving to a new country and already knowing a couple of people because of Twitter. It's been really great.
Now, we've kind of touched on this already, but having two linguists, I know that you said you try to keep the terminology down to a minimum, which is great. Do you have any other tips for keeping it grounded, or do you find that you are sort of gradually engaging in this really high-level conversation that other people can't follow?
I think it's bringing people into the high-level conversation. So by the end of the half hour, we might be in something that is really complex and that we would challenge our, higher-level grad students to grapple with. But we've scaffolded it through maybe an example that's come through the show, or kind of slowly building up to it or relating it to people's personal experiences. So we tackle some big topics in kind of the social importance of language, in just some of the fundamental features of language as an analyzable resource. So, yeah.
And so you don't keep it down, you bring it up, but then get people to come up to your level.
Yeah, and I think, we do have people listening who are linguists and we have people listening who are non-linguists, and we always keep both of those audiences in mind. And I think linguists like to listen because it is the kind of conversations we love to have, This is I will spend half an hour talking about kind of cross-linguistic variation in colour terminology with linguist friends. So I think there's an appreciation of talking about this stuff anyway. And, you kind of get these, they can relate it to those higher level terminology-filled debates and discussions that are happening without us necessarily having to take it all the way there immediately. So it's kind of straddling those two groups.
I am really mindful of that as well. And one of the nicest things about the show was to find that, people who aren't linguists are enjoying it, but also the linguists are into it too.
Yeah.
And if you can do that, then you know that you're kind of pitching it right. That's my measure of success, I think.
Yeah.
Let's just say that I'm a new linguist.
Okay. Congratulations. You've chosen a great discipline.
Thanks.
You have so much ahead of you. I'm so excited.
Yay! A lot of the old stuff is falling away. I don't see as many people. I mean, generativism is still a thing, but I don't see as many people locked into a hardened sort of Chomskyan view. I see other ways of thinking coming up. Sociolinguistics, obviously hugely popular. What are the most interesting areas that you see coming up in linguistics?
Right. So I think I want to frame this around the positive. So I think the positive thing is that different sub-disciplines, what would formerly have been different tribes of linguists, are beginning to talk to each other more. And I think we are finally beginning to see a discipline maturing in terms of like within psychology, there are many sub-disciplines and some of them don't even engage with each other. But linguistics has this reputation for being quite tribal. And I hope that what we're seeing with the new generation is an understanding that we're linguists first. And we may have some discipline internal discussions, but that they don't need to be the thing that the public is brought into. And I know you've talked about this on your show a lot, and we don't actually find it interesting enough to talk about on ours because there are so many cool things happening. But I think this tribalism is starting to break down, and so the coolest research to me is the research that's straddling what used to be historically disparate vibes, like tribes and areas. And so people who are bringing, sociolinguistics and discourse analysis together in a legal setting, like Nicole Holliday, who we interviewed on Lingthusiasm, or people who are bringing psycholinguistics methods to fieldwork.
Or big data approaches to typology.
Yeah. And this is where the exciting work is happening to me. And it's kind of, my work is part of a growing attempt to bridge language documentation and research on gesture and multimodality. And that involves, it can be quite tiring because I have to go to Tibeto-Burman conferences and talk to people in my language area, and then I have to go to gesture conferences where I'm often in the one session that has the 4 people who are talking about something that's not a European language or Japanese.
Yeah.
And so it's challenging, and sometimes it's a big bridge to make. I don't think in my area it is that big a bridge. I think it's happening, and slowly. But yeah, that's where the really exciting work is for me, bringing together things that 10 years ago would not have been on the same page.
That's really how the sciences and the arts advance, through cross-pollination, and bringing things together. Yeah, okay, that's true. I look over the stuff that we've covered on this show, and they tend to fall into some categories like child language acquisition or...
is that driven by your personal interests?
Yes, always.
I mean, fair enough.
And sociolinguistic stuff, and with that, social justice and linguistic equality and discrimination and things.
Yeah.
But there are some where we go back into the archives and we discuss some of the classic conflicts of the linguistic wars. But sometimes that can be a little bit like rehashing a lot of old grudges. Yeah,
and I think, a lot of those debates are fine, and it's fine to think about them. And it's like I talk to people about this stuff all the time within the discipline. I just personally think, like, why should we bother bringing people into the debates about generativists versus functionalists without bringing them into, like, what is constituency? You know what I mean? Like, there's so much there's so much cool stuff that we can share with people. I personally would rather focus on that.
Yeah, okay. That's cool.
I mean, I think it's great that you're trying to explain to people what's happening in these stories that we get in the media about, what people are doing. But yeah,
because it's not dead. I mean, those old viewpoints still cast a really long shadow,
and they're not old viewpoints. There are definitely people working in, it's one of those things. It's like some of my good friends are formalists, and I think that work is really valuable and has a lot to teach us, and various formal approaches to syntax have really informed the way computational linguistics has handled natural language processing.
Yeah.
And I think it's given us ways to tackle particular features of language acquisition or cross-linguistic diversity.
That solves certain problems in forensics, for instance.
For example. So, yeah, sometimes we kind of throw the language acquiring baby out with the bathwater when we get too caught up in these debates.
Do you know what, though? One of the things I noticed from the talks that I attended is that there has been a conciliatory stance adopted. Like, some people are avoiding the whole, like, what was it, Balthazar Bickel in his plenary. He avoided the whole, does Piraha have recursion or not, which we've talked about a number of times. Instead, he was more like, instead of asking that question, let's ask a different question. And the question was, is it, what makes recursion such a good strategy in human languages?
Yeah.
And so, getting things on a productive footing. Or Alice Gaby, who was talking about Whorfianism, and you know what?
Yeah, Alice could talk about anything, though.
Okay, good.
That is definitely one of my, like, getting to hang out with your idols kind of thing is
She's awesome.
Linguistics conferences, they're the best.
They're the best! You meet people like Lauren.
You meet people like Daniel and Alice. And
Do you know what also is great?
Yeah.
Is live tweeting conference talks.
Oh, yeah,
I did that for the first time.
We didn't talk about before.
And you were doing it?
Yeah, I love live tweeting conferences because it serves a number of purposes. It helps people who can't afford to get there or can't get there for other accessibility barriers. It allows you to connect with a whole bunch of people who are at the conference who you might not otherwise know were there. It gives you kind of an extra little community.
Yep.
And also, I can't remember conference talks
No.
after you go to 6 in a row, and so having a little couple of tweet notes
little record
is really good
for you.
Yeah.
And also, I just find it forces me to think, what is the main thing
Yeah.
here? And what's the hook?
What's the take home from this talk?
Yeah, and it's hard to do in real time because I would start tweeting and I would type the person's name,
Yeah.
colon, take a picture, but maybe I would take another picture later because that would be more interesting, and then I would type hashtag ALS 2017, and then I would be like, what's the central question here, which I still don't know the answer to, like, how do children acquire language? And then I would find out.
Yeah.
And sometimes I would change the question as it progressed.
Yeah. It's a couple of people are like, wow, you're so good at conference live tweeting. And it's like, I've done it at quite a few conferences. Like, I think it's this thing of like, people are like, wow, you do a thing well. And it's like, it's because it's a particular skill and I've practiced the skill.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of these things aren't a mystery. It's just practice and...
People are never so surprised to find someone doing something well.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other fun thing is I'll see my sessions and then I'll see you talking about the same talk. And I'll be like, I didn't think about that angle of it.
Yeah.
That's something I missed.
It's nice when you get a few people in the same room with different
and then it's
takeaways.
like, wait a minute, this person is also tweeting. They're here.
They're here. Who are they?
They're here.
Who
and
is this person?
I'll try to figure it out by the angle of the photo that they took
Yeah.
of the speaker. It's like, it's you, isn't it?
Yeah.
So met lots of great tweeters.
Yeah, and I think it's an important thing if you're at a conference to not get stressed if people are on their phones, because some of us are just live tweeting.
We're just live tweeting.
Yeah.
I'm tweeting
I
you.
think some people are also just
That might be stressful.
not engaged, but
I know.
I try and alternate between like
Damn
typey type
phones.
and then like smiling and nodding encouragingly and then back to typing.
You're very kind. I just sit there with a grumpy expression.
Oh, I find it a lot of people I know have this like their concentration face looks very disapproving.
Yes.
And so they're sitting there going, and you're like, oh gosh, my talk is
no,
floundering.
this is
What's
trash.
happening? And they're just like, I was really engaged. that was a really good talk. And you realise that like they're serious. So it's hard when you're talking at a conference.
It is hard when you're talking about at a conference. Although, you know what? The reason, well, one of the main motivators for me coming to this conference was that we had the public linguistics session.
Yes.
Thanks for inviting me.
That's okay. Thanks for coming along.
Putting it together.
Really great.
Oh, it was cool. We had so many great people talking about their work in public linguistics. Once again, we had Tiger Webb, you, me, the Linguistics Roadshow.
Yeah, so Rosie Billington and Katie Jepson
That's right.
from the University of Melbourne.
And then we had who was the tweeter?
We had Bridie Collins, who
That's her.
is the administrative executive. She has some fancy name, but she runs the social media and many other things for the research unit on Indigenous language at the University of Melbourne again.
And then Creole Country.
And then Greg Dixon, who has had many hats over the years. So he was one of the very early editors of Fully Sick, which was an Australian linguistics blog.
Yeah, so many good people who are now beginning to think about engagement with the public. And I think that's super important because without advocates, without friends, science doesn't do well.
And I think it's interesting to see how things have shifted in the last, 7 years that I've been in this space, especially for people who are doing full-time research and want to do some of this outreach and advocacy. I think there is a growing positive assessment of that. I think it may have been seen more as distraction and time wasting when I started.
It's one of those things where outreach is being encouraged, but maybe not officially, not in any tangible way.
It's encouraged just on top of everything else you're doing. Like, just be very, very busy doing a very busy academic job and then do some outreach on top of it.
Great. So now instead of having 2.5 jobs, I've got 3.
Yeah. So, the incentive process still needs to be refined a bit, I think.
I think so, but maybe we can help. Because
I would like to think we can.
we're the knowledge brokers.
I did hear that term the other day. Actually, Gretchen forwarded it to me. She's like, I found our name.
That's where I heard it.
So
There's going to be a podcast called that now.
Okay.
The Language Brokers.
The Language Brokers. It's not a bad one.
It's good.
Do you want to tell people what you think? Because I'm like, I still don't really know what they think this term is, but what do you think a knowledge broker is?
Well, I don't know anything about mortgages, so when I want to get one, I will go to a mortgage broker because they've done this over and over again. They know the ins and outs, and they can help me avoid problems.
Right.
So I guess that's what I think of a broker, like a linguistics broker, a knowledge broker, can say, hey, you know that thing that you might think? Well, we've heard of that thing, and it isn't that great. Maybe you should try thinking in this way instead.
Yeah. That's a good.
And also, we will bring the best to you.
Yeah, it's like we've learned how to, and again, like people seem surprised when you say this is actually just a skill and you can learn it and refine it. But we've learned how to distill this big story with all of your theoretical baggage that you're not ready to part with. We can take the bits that are relevant to people and tell them a story about that.
Teaching and podcasting and academic paper writing really are storytelling, aren't they?
And they're interlinked in ways that I think people undervalue. So I feel less stressed about podcasting, having taught for many years, and I really value taking what I've learned from storytelling and podcasting back into the classroom, and kind of that feeds off each other.
I found that when I was actually giving my presentation part of the panel, I felt more polished than I usually feel. I felt like, all right, I'm speaking with my radio voice.
Oh, right. You were in kind of radio Daniel mode rather than teacher Daniel, conference presenting Daniel mode.
I wonder if there's a difference between teacher Daniel and radio Daniel.
Because I had quite a few people come up to me and just say, that was amazing. Everyone had really great presentations. How did you keep everyone to time? And it's like, well, if you're told you have a 10-minute radio slot, you do a 10-minute radio slot. Like, it's not this, academia it's fascinating to me that, like, you can give an academic conference presentation and no one thinks it's weird that everyone in the audience is really bored and finds it hard to engage with. Or, like, you can write a paper and the hook for it can be so obtuse that people have to work to pull it out.
Oh my gosh, we were expecting to be bored during your presentation, but we weren't.
Yeah, that's what people were basically like. We expected it to be a bit shambolic because we have really different standards for how presentations are performed.
No, you end the show at noon. Yeah. That's what you do.
You've been given a brief, you stick to it.
That was the last thing I said. How long have I gone?
Yeah.
10 minutes. All right.
And you did 10 minutes.
I did 10 minutes because I started at 11. What was it? No, wait, what time? At 3 minutes past, and I ended at 13 minutes past.
Yeah.
It was a good sesh. We are going to make it available one way or another.
It may even be before this. Who knows? With
Make them out first.
The magic of pre-recorded content.
We don't know. You, whatever order you stumble on these things, that is great. Whether you are a Lingthusiasm person who's just getting into talk the talk, or maybe you're a talk the talk person and you're saying, what is this Lingthusiasm thing?
Hi.
Well, you know what? You can get a lot more of Lauren by listening to Lingthusiasm, and you can hear the first half of this session as a special episode on the Lingthusiasm page. So what we're going to do is we're going to drop a link under the comments here, and you can go, and after you've listened to us, you can listen to that.
Cool.
Or vice versa.
Interesting to see.
Any final thoughts?
It's been really fun being able to talk to people about what makes engaging public in linguistics really cool. And it's been great to talk to you about just how much fun that is. We are not called Lingthusiasm for no reason. We are deeply enthusiastic about linguistics, and it's always nice to talk to other people who are too.
I've just enjoyed the conversations, with all the linguists, especially with you, because for some reason, we managed to have the same accommodation. We're in the same place.
Total coinky-dink.
Amazing. So we've just been grabbing breakfast and having talks about stuff, and it's been really great to hang out with you and just share ideas and get to know you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on the show.
It's a pleasure. So that's it for this one. Until next time, keep talking.
I got to be here while you said keep talking. It's like I'm in the radio.
Oh my gosh. That's coming from a human body, that voice. I know that voice.
Yeah. I love how everyone has their own sign-offs.
I'm not sure I like my sign-off.
Yeah, it's good.
Well, it should involve some listening too, don't you think? Keep talking, but don't forget to listen.
I think of talk as inherently dichotomous.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I have a very linguist approach to what talk is. Talk doesn't exist in a context-free vacuum.
Unless it's self-talk.
That's still context.
Yeah, we often use the term speaking a language to mean speaking, listening, reading, right?
Yep.
But not the reverse.
I think we're done with the recording.
And now I challenge you to a ping-pong game.
Okay, this is going to end badly.
Are you ready?
Okay.
Do you even remember how to play this game?
I hit it over this small net.
Yeah, I think as long as we don't get it in the net, we're fine.
I always just I look at this and I'm like, it would be more fun if there were puppies pretending to play real tennis than human-sized people playing mini tennis.
That's a good idea.
We should get puppies. I mean, when I think about like how terrifying professional ping pong players are, the fact that I call them ping pong players probably speaks to my ignorance, but
There are some staggering volleys on line.
I think that's what's happening in, like when you put two linguists together.
You got me.
When you put two linguists together, oh sorry, that was aggressive. You put two linguists together and we're like, the conversation can go like a professional table tennis game because we've got you can kind of skip a lot and you know the background and that kind of stuff.
I seriously think of conversation as table tennis. I really do. You know, you put something out there, they send it back.
The other person has to be in a position to take it back.
And there's certain common ground.
And when you're both professional table tennis players, that common ground can move really fast.
Yep.
And you can preempt where the next person's going.
And also, the ball is orange.
And the ball is high vis. And so podcasting is like two people who can play ping pong really quickly, learning to slow it down. Or like, I'm not going to even hit that, I'm just going to grab it.
It was a reflex.
It was just a
survival instinct.
Yeah. I was like, I'm not going to chase it, I'm just going to. Or maybe like, you learn to basketball like the Harlem Globetrotters.
Oh.
Like, you become so good you actually stop really playing the game and you play this like silly
You're doing something else.
showing off game. Yeah, you're no longer really playing basketball. You're no longer really having a linguist conversation.
So what would that be? Would that be like...
You're performing a linguist conversation.
So would the Harlem Globetrotters be like oratory in language terms?
The Harlem Globetrotters would be like, well, I guess like it's not actually a bad analogy for Lingthusiasm because Gretchen and I sit there and rehearse how the thing's going to go down. Like we plot it out in the way the Harlem Globetrotters practice their tricks.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, it's a bit different for us. I write a run sheet and send it out the morning of.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kylie reads it, Ben doesn't.
Yeah.
It's a bit Harry Potter, Hermione, and Ron. You know what I mean?
Well, it is, look, except that you're Hermione.
No, I'm
because
Harry.
You're SWAT.
I'm obviously Harry.
You're the SWAT. Harry's a...
Kylie's a SWAT.
Harry's the privileged white dude who just gets by having rich parents.
That's me. I think we need to have this discussion on Talk the Talk. Am I Hermione or am I... Ben, you're definitely wrong.
No, you're Dumbledore. You're the one who has all the knowledge.
I'm Dumbledore.
Yeah.
I might be Dumbledore, and then Kylie can be Harry.
She's Harry and Hermione.
She's Hermione.
Hermione.